He's all I got left." Clara Mae Thornton dropped to her knees in the frozen mud, clutching a trembling puppy against her chest. Her fingers were blue. Her lips cracked and bleeding. She had walked 9 miles through the snow to reach the iron gate of Callahan Ranch, the last place in Montana Territory where a desperate girl might find mercy. She pressed her forehead to the dog's matted fur and whispered, "I'm sorry, Biscuit. I'm so sorry." Then she heard boots crunching through the frost behind her. And a voice, low and rough, said, "Get up, miss. You ain't leaving him here alone." If you believe in second chances in love that finds you when you least expect it, then subscribe to our channel and follow Clara's story to the very end. Drop a comment below and tell us what city you're watching from. We want to see how far this tale of hope travels across America. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Montana Territory, November 1881. The cold had teeth that night. Clara Mae Thornton hadn't eaten in 3 days. Her grandmother's cough had gotten worse, rattling through the walls of their one-room shack like a death rattle waiting to happen. The last of their flour was gone. The last of their hope, too. All she had left was Biscuit. The collie pup had found her 6 months ago, wandering into the mining camp the day after her father's funeral. He'd pressed his wet nose against her palm while she sat alone by the grave, and he hadn't left her side since. But now his ribs showed through his golden fur. His eyes had gone dull. And Clara knew with the terrible certainty of someone who had already lost too much, that if she didn't do something tonight, he would die. So she walked. 9 miles through the snow. 9 miles with no coat, no boots worth the name, nothing but a flour sack wrapped around the shivering dog in her arms. She walked until she reached the iron gate of Callahan Ranch. Everyone in Bozeman knew Josiah Callahan, the widower, the war hero, the man who had built the biggest spread in the territory with nothing but his 2 hands and a grief he never spoke about. They said he was fair. They said he was kind if you caught him right. Clara didn't know if any of that was true. She only knew she was out of options. She knelt in the frozen mud just inside the fence line. Her fingers fumbled with the scrap of paper she'd written by candlelight, the words crooked and desperate. "Please take my dog. His name is Biscuit. He don't eat much. I can't keep him no more." She tied it around his neck with a piece of twine from her sleeve. "Okay," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Okay, baby. You gotta stay here now." Biscuit whimpered. He tried to climb back into her arms, his paws scraping at her threadbare dress. "No." She pushed him down gently, tears freezing on her cheeks. "No, Biscuit. You can't come with me. There ain't nothing left where I'm going. You understand? There ain't nothing left." The dog tilted his head. His brown eyes caught the moonlight, and something in them, something trusting, something pure, shattered her completely. She gathered him up one last time, pressed her lips to the top of his head, breathed in the smell of him, dirt and fur, and the last good thing in her world. "You be good," she choked. "You eat whatever they give you. You grow big and strong, and maybe someday, if the Lord sees fit, I'll come back for you." Biscuit licked her cheek. Clara set him down, stood up, turned away, and ran. She made it maybe 20 steps before she heard the heavy groan of a door swinging open. Boots on wood. Then on frozen ground coming closer. "Hold up." She stopped. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "I said hold up, miss." Clara turned slowly, her whole body trembling. Not from cold anymore, from fear. A man stood 10 feet away. Tall, broad-shouldered. A sheepskin coat hung open over a work shirt, and his breath fogged in the night air. He held a lantern in one hand, the light catching the silver at his temples, the hard line of his jaw, the scar that ran from his cheekbone to his ear. Josiah Callahan. He looked at her, then at the dog sitting alone by the gate, the note fluttering from his collar. "That yours?" he asked. Clara's throat closed. She couldn't speak. could only nod. Josiah walked past her without another word. He crouched down, lifted Biscuit, gently cradled him against his chest. The dog didn't struggle, just pressed his nose into the man's coat and let out a small, exhausted sigh. Josiah read the note. His jaw tightened. Then he looked up at Clara, still standing frozen in the moonlight, and said the words that would change everything. "The dog ain't stayin' if you don't." She blinked. "What?" "You heard me." He straightened Biscuit, still in his arms. "I don't take in strays without knowin' where they come from. And I sure as hell don't let a girl walk off into the night to freeze to death." "I ain't asking for charity," Clara said quickly. Her voice came out sharper than she meant. "I just need someone to take care of him. That's all. I can't feed him no more." "I can see that." Josiah's eyes moved over her, the torn dress, the bare feet in broken boots, the hollows under her cheekbones. "When's the last time you ate?" She didn't answer. "That's what I thought." He shifted Biscuit to one arm and gestured toward the house with a slight motion of his head. "Come inside. Get warm. We'll figure out the rest in the morning." Clara stepped back. "I don't know you. I don't know what you want." Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Something sadder than that. "I don't want nothing," he said quietly. "I'm just a man who's buried too many people he couldn't save. I ain't in the business of adding to that number." The wind cut through her thin dress. Her fingers had gone numb. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Clara looked at Biscuit, nestled warm and safe in this stranger's arms. The dog's tail wagged once, weakly, hopefully. She thought about her grandmother alone in that cold shack. She thought about the debts her father had left behind the men who would come collecting soon. She thought about all the doors that had slammed in her face over the past 6 months. All the people who had looked at her like she was something to be scraped off their boots. And here was this man, this stranger, offering her warmth when he could have just taken the dog and let her go. "One night," she said finally. "Just one night. Then I'll leave." Josiah nodded once. "Fair enough." He turned and walked toward the house, not waiting to see if she followed. She followed. The kitchen was warm. That was the first thing Clara noticed, the heat from the cast-iron stove seeping into her bones, thawing the ice in her blood. She stood just inside the doorway, dripping snowmelt onto the plank floor, afraid to move any further. Josiah set Biscuit down on a folded blanket near the stove. The dog curled up immediately, eyes already closing. "Sit," Josiah said, pulling out a chair at the rough-hewn table. Clara didn't move. "I'm wet. I'll ruin your floor." "Floor's seen worse." He pulled out the chair further. "Sit down before you fall down." She sat. He moved around the kitchen without speaking, poured milk from a clay jug into a tin cup, cut a thick slice of bread from a loaf on the counter, added a chunk of cheese and a piece of dried beef. Set it all in front of her. Clara stared at it. Her stomach cramped so hard she nearly doubled over. "Eat slow," Josiah said, settling into the chair across from her. "You'll make yourself sick otherwise." She picked up the bread with shaking hands, took a bite. The taste, yeast and salt and something almost sweet, brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I ain't had fresh bread in, I don't remember how long." Josiah didn't respond, just watched her eat with that same unreadable expression. When she'd finished half the plate, he spoke again. "What's your name?" "Clara. Clara Mae Thornton." "Thornton." He frowned slightly. "There was a Thornton worked the Silver Creek mine. Jacob Thornton, that kin of yours." Her jaw tightened. "My father." "I heard he died. Cave-in, wasn't it?" "Yes, sir." "I'm sorry." Clara looked down at her plate. "Don't be. He wasn't a good man." Josiah was quiet for a moment. Then, "A man don't have to be good for his death to leave a hole." She looked up sharply. There was no judgment in his face, no pity either, just understanding. "I suppose that's true," she said quietly. You got family. Anybody looking after you? My grandmother. She's sick. Been sick since before my daddy died. Clara's voice caught. She can't work. Can't hardly breathe most days. I've been doing what I can, washing, mending, whatever folks will pay me for, but it ain't enough. It ain't never enough. Where you been staying? There's a shed behind the old Hanson place. Mrs. Hanson lets us use it on account of my grandma used to teach her children their letters. It ain't much, but it keeps the wind out. Most of the wind anyway. Josiah's jaw tightened. You been living in a shed in this weather? We ain't got nowhere else to go. Clara set down the bread. Her appetite had vanished. I know what people think. They think my daddy drank himself into debt, and that's true enough. They think he left us with nothing, and that's true too. But my grandma, she don't deserve to die in a shed like some stray dog. She used to be a teacher. She used to be somebody. And you? Clara met his eyes. I don't matter. I just need to keep her alive long enough to... She trailed off. Long enough to what? She didn't have an answer. She'd never let herself think that far ahead. Josiah leaned back in his chair. How old are you, Clara? 19? 19. He said it like it hurt. And you've been carrying all this by yourself. Ain't nobody else to carry it. Silence stretched between them. Biscuit whimpered in his sleep pause, twitching. Finally, Josiah stood. There's a room at the end of the hall. Bed's made up. You'll sleep there tonight. I told you I ain't asking for... I know what you told me. He cut her off, but not unkindly. And I'm telling you that room's been empty for 8 years. Having someone in it for one night ain't gonna cost me nothing. 8 years. Clara thought about what people said that his wife was buried behind the barn, that he'd come home from the war to find her grave already dug. I'm sorry, she said softly. About your wife. Josiah went still. His hand rested on the back of his chair, knuckles white. How'd you know about that? Everybody knows. Everybody talks. He let out a breath. Yeah, reckon they do. She must have been someone special, for you to still keep her room. He didn't answer for a long moment. When he did, his voice was rough around the edges. She was, and our boy too. Clara's heart clenched. You had a son. Thomas. He was 4 when the fever took them both. I was in Virginia fighting a war I didn't believe in, while my whole world disappeared. He moved toward the door, his back to her. Get some sleep, Miss Thornton. We'll talk in the morning. Mr. Callahan. He stopped but didn't turn. Thank you, Clara said, for taking us in, even if it's just for tonight. He stood there a moment longer. Then quietly. It don't have to be just for tonight. But that's a conversation for when you've had some rest. He walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Clara sat alone in the warm kitchen, Biscuit snoring at her feet, and wondered what kind of man offers shelter to a stranger in the middle of the night. A dangerous man, maybe. Or maybe just a lonely one. She didn't sleep that night. The bed was too soft. The room was too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards made her bolt upright, heart pounding, hands reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. But as the first gray light of dawn crept through the window, something else crept into her chest. A feeling she hadn't allowed herself in months. Hope. It was a dangerous thing, hope. It made you believe in futures that might never come. It made you soft when the world demanded you stay hard. Clara pushed it down, buried it deep. She had learned the hard way what happened when you let yourself want things. But when she opened the bedroom door and found Biscuit waiting for her in the hallway, tail-wagging eyes bright for the first time in weeks, she felt it again. That dangerous flutter, that treacherous warmth. Morning, baby, she whispered, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. You sleep good? Biscuit licked her face. From somewhere deeper in the house came the sound of voices, a woman's voice, sharp and practical, and Josiah's low and steady. Clara followed the sound to the kitchen. A black woman in her 50s stood at the stove stirring something in an iron pot. She wore a plain blue dress and a white apron, and her gray-streaked hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She turned when Clara entered, and her eyes, dark shrewd, missing nothing, swept over her like a broom clearing dust. "So," the woman said, "this is the stray you dragged in last night." Josiah sat at the table, a cup of coffee in front of him. "Hattie, this is Clara Thornton. Clara, this is Hattie Rawlings. She runs the house." "Runs the house," Hattie repeated with a snort. "That's a fancy way of saying I keep this man from eating burned beans every night." She turned back to the stove. "Sit down, girl. You look like you're about to blow away in a strong wind." Clara sat. Hattie slid a bowl of porridge in front of her, thick with honey and butter. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel old." Hattie poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, studying Clara with undisguised curiosity. "Josiah says you've been living in a shed." Clara's cheeks burned. "Yes, Ma. I mean, yes. With your sick grandmother. Yes. And you walked 9 miles through the snow to give away your dog because you couldn't feed him." Clara's throat tightened. She couldn't speak, just nodded. Hattie looked at Josiah. Something passed between them, a conversation without words, the kind only people who've known each other a long time can have. Hattie said finally. She set down her coffee cup. "Girl, you know how to work." Clara straightened. "I can clean. I can cook, not fancy, but enough to get by. I can mend clothes, tend a garden, care for animals. I'll do whatever needs doing." "What about nursing? You know how to care for sick folks." "I've been caring for my grandmother for near on a year now. I know how to change dressings, make poultices, keep a fever down." Hattie nodded slowly. "We could use an extra pair of hands around here, especially with winter coming on." Josiah. He looked at Clara. "You want a job, Miss Thornton?" Her heart stopped. "What?" "Room and board plus wages. Nothing much but enough to put away. And your grandmother, we got a cabin at the south end of the property. Been sitting empty since old Pete passed on last spring. It ain't big, but it's warm, and it's a damn sight better than a shed." Clara stared at him. "Why would you do this? You don't even know me." "No," he agreed. "I don't. But I know what it looks like when someone's been fighting alone for too long. And I know what it feels like to lose everybody you love." He set down his coffee cup. "You ain't got to decide right now. Take some time. Think it over. But the offer stands." Clara thought about her grandmother coughing blood into a rag in that freezing shack. She thought about Earl Drummond, the man who held her father's debts, and the way he looked at her when he said she could work off what was owed. She thought about all the nights she'd lain awake wondering if tomorrow would be the day they finally gave up. And then she thought about this man, this stranger, who had opened his door in the middle of the night and offered her everything she'd been too afraid to hope for. "I don't need time," she said. Her voice was steady. "I'll work for you, Mr. Callahan, and I'll work hard. You won't regret this." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "I don't reckon I will," he said quietly. Hattie clapped her hands, once breaking the moment. "Well then, finish your breakfast, girl. We got work to do." Clara picked up her spoon. Biscuit curled up under the table, his warm body pressed against her feet. And somewhere deep in her chest, buried beneath years of hurt and fear and loss, that dangerous thing called hope began to bloom. She didn't know yet that danger was coming, that Earl Drummond wouldn't let her go so easily, that the ghosts of the past Josiah's and her own weren't finished haunting either of them. But in that moment, with the fire crackling and the snow falling softly outside the window, Clara Mae Thornton allowed herself to believe just for a second that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a place where she belonged. 3 days passed, and Clara learned the rhythm of Callahan Ranch. She rose before dawn, helped Hattie with breakfast, and spent her mornings scrubbing floors and washing linens until her knuckles cracked. In the afternoons, she tended to the chickens' collected eggs and learned to brush down the horses without flinching when they snorted. Biscuit followed her everywhere. His coat had begun to shine again, his ribs less visible beneath the golden fur. He slept at the foot of her bed each night, and each morning he greeted her with a wagging tail and wet nose against her palm. It was more peace than Clara had known in years, but peace she had learned never lasted. On the fourth morning, she found Josiah in the barn, saddling his gray mare. His jaw was set tight, his movements sharp and efficient. "Mr. Callahan." He didn't look up. "Mornin', Miss Thornton." "Where you headed?" "Town. Got business to attend to." Clara stepped closer. "What kind of business?" Josiah paused, his hand resting on the saddle horn. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her stomach drop. "I made some inquiries," he said carefully, "about your father's debts." Clara's blood went cold. "You did what?" "I needed to know what you were running from, so I asked around." "You had no right." "I had every right." His voice was calm but firm. "You're living under my roof now, working for me. If there's trouble coming, I need to know about it." Clara's hands curled into fists. "What did you find out?" Josiah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your daddy owed money to a man named Earl Drummond. A lot of money. Near $300 from what I hear." $300. Clara felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. She had known the debt was bad. She hadn't known it was that bad. "Drummond's been looking for you," Josiah continued. "Asking around town. Somebody told him you'd been seen heading out toward my land." "No." Clara shook her head. No. I have to leave. I have to go right now before he finds me here." "You ain't going nowhere." "You don't understand." Her voice cracked. "Drummond ain't just a creditor. He owns the saloon in town, the gambling hall. Half the sheriff's deputies owe him favors. If he wants something, he takes it. And he wants—" She stopped. Couldn't say it. Josiah's eyes hardened. "He wants you." Clara looked away. Her whole body was shaking. "He told me," she said quietly. "After my daddy died. He came to the shed where we were staying. Said I could work off the debt. Said he'd put me up in a nice room above the saloon. Give me pretty dresses. All I had to do was be friendly to his customers." The words hung in the air like poison. Josiah didn't move, didn't speak. But something changed in his face, a darkness settling behind his eyes that Clara had never seen before. "When was this?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. 2 weeks ago. I told him no. He said I'd change my mind when winter got bad enough. When my grandmother got sick enough." Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "He was right about one thing. Winter's here, and Grandma's worse every day. But I ain't never gonna do what he wants. I'd rather die in that shed." Josiah took a step toward her. "Look at me." She looked up. "You ain't gonna die in no shed," he said. "And you ain't gonna work in no saloon. You understand me? You can't stop him. Nobody can. Watch me." He turned back to his horse and swung up into the saddle. "Where are you going?" Clara demanded. "To have a conversation with Mr. Drummond." "No!" She grabbed the horse's bridle. "You can't. He's got men. Dangerous men. If you go after him—" "I ain't going after him." Josiah looked down at her, and his expression softened just slightly. "I'm going to pay him." Clara blinked. "What?" $300. That's the debt, right? I'll pay it off. Square and legal. Then you don't owe him nothing, and he's got no claim on you. I can't let you do that. You ain't letting me do nothing. I'm choosing to do it." "Why?" Clara's voice broke. "Why would you spend that kind of money on someone like me?" Josiah was quiet for a long moment. His hand tightened on the reins. "Because 8 years ago," he said finally, "my wife died while I was 500 miles away fighting a war I didn't believe in. And my boy, my little boy, he died in her arms calling for a daddy who wasn't there to save him." Clara's throat closed. "I couldn't save them." Josiah continued, his voice rough. I couldn't save anybody. But maybe I can save you. And maybe that counts for something. He kicked the horse into motion before she could respond. Clara stood in the barn doorway, watching him ride toward town, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Something she had kept locked away for so long, she had forgotten it existed. She didn't have a name for it yet, but it felt like the beginning of something. Josiah returned 3 hours later. Clara was in the kitchen helping Hattie peel potatoes, but she dropped the knife the moment she heard hoofbeats in the yard. She ran to the front porch, heart hammering. Josiah dismounted slowly. His face was unreadable. Well, Clara demanded. What happened? Did you pay him? I paid him. Relief flooded through her so intense her knees nearly buckled. Thank God! Thank God! He took the money. Josiah continued, climbing the porch steps. But he ain't happy about it. Made that real clear. What do you mean? Josiah stopped in front of her. He said you were worth more to him than $300. Said he had plans for you. Said I was interfering with a business arrangement. Clara felt sick. What did you say? I told him there wasn't no arrangement. Told him you were under my protection now, and if he had a problem with that, he could take it up with me personally. Josiah. He laughed. Josiah's jaw tightened. Said I was a fool. Said I didn't know what I was getting into. Said some debts can't be paid off with money. Clara's blood turned to ice. What does that mean? It means he ain't done. Josiah met her eyes. It means he's gonna come for you eventually. Not for the money, for you. Because you told him no, and men like Drummond don't take kindly to being told no. Then I have to leave. I have to take my grandmother and go somewhere he can't find us. There ain't nowhere he can't find you. Not in Montana. Probably not in the whole territory. Josiah took a step closer. Your best chance, your only chance, is to stay here, behind these walls, with people who will fight for you. You barely know me. I know enough. Clara stared at him. This man who had taken her in, fed her, paid off her father's debts, and now was offering to stand between her and a monster. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing all this? Josiah didn't answer right away. He looked out across the land, the snow-covered fields, the mountains rising in the distance, and something passed across his face, something old and painful. Because I've been alone too long, he said quietly. And maybe I'm tired of it. He walked past her into the house without another word. That afternoon, Clara made a decision. She found Josiah in his study, going over ledgers by lamplight. She knocked on the doorframe, and he looked up. I want to bring my grandmother here, she said. Today. Right now. Josiah set down his pen. The cabin at the south end ain't ready yet. Needs another day or two to. She can stay in my room. I'll sleep on the floor. I don't care. Clara's voice shook. If Drummond's coming for me, I need her here. I need her safe. I can't protect her from 8 miles away. Josiah studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. I'll have Toby hitch up the wagon. Toby? Ranch hand. Good kid. He'll drive you into town and back. Clara hesitated. You ain't coming. Best if I don't. Drummond's got eyes everywhere. If he sees me escorting you around, he'll know you're important to me. Right now, it's better if he thinks you're just hired help. Clara felt something flutter in her chest. Am I just hired help? Josiah met her eyes. You know you ain't. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went to find Toby. Toby Jenkins was 17, gangly as a newborn colt, with a shock of red hair and a face full of freckles. He talked constantly about the horses, about the weather, about the time he'd seen a grizzly bear 3 miles south of the property. Clara barely heard a word of it. Her mind was on her grandmother, on Drummond, on the look in Josiah's eyes when he'd said she wasn't just hired help. The wagon rattled over the frozen road, and Clara clutched the seat until her fingers went numb. You okay, miss? Toby asked, glancing at her. You look like you're about to be sick. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look scared. Clara turned to face him. Do you know who Earl Drummond is? Toby's face went pale. Yeah, I know him. He's coming for me. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he's coming. The boy was quiet for a moment. Then, Mr. Callahan won't let nothing happen to you. He's the toughest man I ever met. Fought in the war. Killed men. Lots of men. One man can't stand against Drummond and all his hired guns. Mr. Callahan ain't just one man. Toby squared his shoulders. He's got me, and Hattie, and now you. That's 4 people who'd fight for this ranch. For each other. Clara stared at him, this skinny, freckle-faced boy who barely came up to her shoulder. You'd fight for me, she asked. You don't even know me. Toby shrugged. Mr. Callahan took me in when I didn't have nobody. Gave me a job abed 3 meals a day. If he says you're worth fighting for, then you're worth fighting for. Simple as that. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you, Toby. He grinned. Don't thank me yet. You ain't seen me shoot. They reached the edge of town 20 minutes later. Clara directed Toby to the old Hanson place around back, where the shed sat, half hidden behind a stand of dead cottonwoods. He pulled the wagon to a stop and Clara jumped down before the wheels had fully stopped turning. Grandma. She pushed open the shed door. Grandma, it's me. It's Clara. The smell hit her first sickness and sweat, and something worse. The shed was dark, lit only by a thin beam of light through a crack in the wall. In the corner, on a pile of straw and old blankets, lay Agnes Marie Thornton. She was worse than Clara had ever seen her. Her skin was gray, her breathing shallow and wet. Her eyes were closed, and for one terrible moment, Clara thought she was dead. Grandma. She dropped to her knees beside the bed. Grandma, wake up! Please wake up! Agnes's eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy, unfocused. Clara? Her voice was barely a whisper. That you, child? It's me. I'm here. Clara grabbed her grandmother's hand. It was ice cold. I'm taking you somewhere safe, somewhere warm. Can you stand? I don't think so. That's okay, that's okay. Clara turned to the doorway. Toby, I need help. The boy appeared a moment later. His face went white when he saw Agnes. Jesus, he breathed. Is she? She's alive. Help me lift her. Together they carried Agnes out of the shed. She weighed almost nothing, just skin and bones wrapped in a threadbare nightgown. Clara's heart broke with every step. They laid her in the wagon bed, covered her with every blanket they had. Clara climbed up beside her and cradled her grandmother's head in her lap. Drive fast, she told Toby. Please. He didn't need to be told twice. The wagon lurched forward, and Clara held her grandmother close, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since she was a child. They were halfway back to the ranch when Agnes spoke. Clara? I'm here, Grandma. I'm right here. There's something I need to tell you. Agnes's breath rattled in her chest. About your daddy? Clara went still. What about him? He wasn't always bad. Agnes's cloudy eyes found hers. When your mama was alive, he was different, kind, gentle, loved you more than anything in this world. Mama died when I was 6. I barely remember her. I know, and I think your daddy couldn't bear it. Losing her. It broke something inside him. Agnes coughed a wet, horrible sound. Don't hate him, Clara. Don't carry that poison with you. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. He hit me, Grandma. He drank away everything we had. He sold me to Drummond like I was livestock. I know. Agnes's hand trembled as she reached up to touch Clara's face. And I ain't asking you to forgive him. I'm just asking you not to let his sins become yours. You got a good heart, child. Don't let bitterness rot it away." Clara couldn't speak, just held her grandmother tighter and wept. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting. Josiah was waiting on the porch. The moment he saw Agnes, he strode forward and lifted her out of the wagon as gently as if she were made of glass. "Hattie," he called, "get the back room ready. Hot water, clean linens, whatever medicine we got." "Already done," Hattie said, appearing in the doorway. "Bring her in. Quick now." They carried Agnes inside and laid her on the bed in the small room at the end of the hall, the room that had belonged to Josiah's wife. Clara started to protest, but Josiah silenced her with a look. "She needs it more than any ghost," he said quietly. "Let her have it." Hattie took over, then shooing everyone out of the room. "I'll do what I can, but this woman needs a doctor, a real one." "Nearest doctor's in Helena," Josiah said. "That's 2 days' ride in good weather." "Then you best leave at first light." Josiah nodded. He turned to Clara, who stood frozen in the hallway, her face streaked with tears and dirt. "She's strong," he said. "Stronger than she looks. She'll hold on." "You don't know that." "No, I don't." He took a step closer. "But I know you didn't drag her out of that shed just to watch her die. And I know that sometimes believing is enough to make something true." Clara looked up at him. This man she had known for less than a week. This stranger who had become something more. "Why do you keep saving me?" she whispered. Josiah didn't answer. Just reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He walked away before she could respond. Clara stood alone in the hallway, her grandmother's labored breathing the only sound in the house, and wondered if she was strong enough to survive what was coming. She didn't sleep that night. She sat beside her grandmother's bed, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall with each shallow breath. Hattie came and went bringing tea, checking temperatures, applying poultices that smelled like pine and something bitter. Sometime past midnight, Agnes opened her eyes. "Clara." "I'm here." "That man." Agnes's voice was thin as paper. "The one who carried me in." "Who is he?" "His name is Josiah Callahan. He owns this ranch." "Is he good?" Clara thought about it. "I think so. Yeah, I think he might be." Agnes smiled weakly. "Good. You deserve someone good." "Grandma, it ain't like that. He's just child." Agnes squeezed her hand. "I may be old and I may be sick, but I ain't blind. I saw the way he looked at you." Clara's cheeks burned. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Agnes closed her eyes, still smiling. "We'll see." Clara stayed by her side until dawn. When the first gray light crept through the window, she heard movement in the house. Boots on floorboards. Low voices. The creak of the front door. She found Josiah in the yard, saddling his horse. "You're leaving?" she asked. "Going to Helena. Gonna bring back a doctor." "That's a 4-day trip. Round trip, I mean." "I know." He tightened the cinch. "Hattie will look after your grandmother. Toby will keep watch on the property. You just focus on staying inside and staying safe." "And Drummond?" Josiah's jaw tightened. "He won't make a move yet. He's smart. He'll wait, watch, figure out the lay of the land. But just in case, I'm leaving my rifle with Toby. Boy can shoot better than most men I know." Clara stepped closer. "Be careful." "Always am." "No, I mean it." She grabbed his arm and he went still. "You're the first person who's been kind to me in a long time. If something happened to you because of me..." "Nothing's gonna happen to me." He covered her hand with his. "I've survived worse than a 2-day ride to Helena. The ride ain't what I'm worried about." Josiah looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I'll be back," he said. "That's a promise." He swung up into the saddle, and rode out before she could find her voice. Clara watched him go until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she turned and walked back inside, her hands still tingling where his lips had touched. The first day passed slowly. Clara split her time between her grandmother's bedside and the kitchen, helping Hattie with meals and laundry. Toby patrolled the property rifle slung over his shoulder, trying to look tougher than his 17 years allowed. Biscuit stayed close, sensing the tension in the air. He lay at Clara's feet while she sat with Agnes, his warm body a small comfort against the cold that had seeped into her bones. On the second day, Agnes's fever broke. Clara was there when it happened, when her grandmother's skin finally cooled, when her breathing eased, when color began to return to her cheeks. "Oh, thank God," Clara breathed, pressing her forehead to Agnes's hand. "Thank God." "Don't thank God yet," Hattie said from the doorway. "She's still weak as a kitten. But this is a good sign, a real good sign." That evening, for the first time since arriving at the ranch, Clara allowed herself to hope that maybe things were going to be okay. She was wrong. The third morning, she woke to the sound of horses. Not one horse, several. Moving fast, their hoofbeats thundering against the frozen ground. Clara bolted upright. Biscuit was already at the window, growling low in his throat. "Shh." She crept to the glass and peered out. 6 riders, armed, coming up the main road toward the ranch, and at their head, mounted on a black stallion, was a man she recognized, Earl Drummond. Clara's blood turned to ice. "Hattie!" She ran from the room, nearly tripping on her skirts. "Hattie, he's here. Drummond's here." Hattie appeared from the kitchen, her face grim. "I heard. Toby's already outside." "Toby can't fight 6 men." "He ain't gonna have to." Hattie grabbed Clara's arm. "You listen to me. You stay inside. You stay quiet. Don't let him see you. Don't let him know you're scared. Men like Drummond feed on fear. You understand?" Clara nodded, her whole body trembling. Hattie strode to the front door and stepped onto the porch arms, cross-chin high. Clara crouched beneath the window, listening. The horses stopped. Leather creaked. Boots hit the ground. "Morning, ma'am." Earl Drummond's voice was smooth as silk with a razor underneath. "Looking for Mr. Callahan. He home." "He ain't," Hattie said. "Gone to Helena." "That's so shame. I was hoping to have a conversation with him." "Whatever you got to say, you can say to me." Drummond laughed. It was not a nice sound. "You're a brave woman, Mrs. Rawlings. I've always admired that about you. But I didn't come to talk to the help. I came for the girl." Silence. "What girl?" Hattie asked. "Don't play dumb with me. Clara Thornton, the one who owes me $300. That debt's paid. Mr. Callahan paid it himself." "Ah, yes, he did." Drummond's voice hardened. "But see, that's not how this works. The money was never the point. Clara's daddy promised me something and I intend to collect. Her daddy's dead, and whatever he promised ain't binding on her." "That's where you're wrong." Footsteps on the porch stairs. 1, 2, 3. A debt is a debt, and one way or another that girl is gonna pay it. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. "She ain't here," Hattie said, her voice steel. "Then you won't mind if my boys take a look around." A long pause. Then Hattie spoke again, and her voice had changed harder, colder than Clara had ever heard it. "Mr. Drummond, I've lived in this territory for 30 years. I've seen men like you come and go. Some of them are buried out past the tree line. Some of them just disappeared. You want to search this house, you go right ahead. But I promise you this, you set 1 foot inside that door, and you ain't leaving this property alive." Silence. The wind howled across the yard. Then Drummond laughed again. "You've got spirit, Mrs. Rawlings. I like that. Tell you what, I'll give Callahan 3 days to get back. Then he and I are going to have a real conversation. And if he can't give me what I want..." He let the threat hang in the air. 3 days. he repeated. Clock's ticking. The horses wheeled around. Hoofbeats faded into the distance. Clara didn't move. Couldn't move. Her legs had gone numb. Hattie came back inside and found her crouched beneath the window shaking. He's gone, Hattie said. For now. He'll be back. Yes, he will. Clara looked up, tears streaming down her face. What do we do? Hattie crouched down beside her and took her hands. We wait for Josiah. We keep your grandmother safe. And when Drummond comes back, we fight. We can't win. You know we can't. Hattie's eyes blazed. Child, let me tell you something. I was born a slave in Georgia. I was sold 3 times before I was 12 years old. I watched my mama get beaten to death for teaching me to read. I walked 200 miles to freedom with nothing but the clothes on my back and a knife I stole from my master's kitchen. I have survived things you can't even imagine. She gripped Clara's hands tighter. Earl Drummond thinks he's powerful, but he ain't nothing compared to what I've faced. And he sure as hell ain't nothing compared to what Josiah Callahan will do to him when he gets back. Clara stared at her. You really believe that? Hattie smiled grimly. I know it. Now get up. We got work to do. Clara got up, and for the first time since Drummond's name had entered her life, she felt something other than fear. She felt ready. The next 2 days crawled by like years. Clara barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the windows made her bolt upright, heart-pounding, ears straining for the sound of horses. She spent her days at her grandmother's bedside, watching the old woman's chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer. Agnes was getting stronger. She could sit up now, take broth, even speak in full sentences without coughing. But she was still too weak to travel, too fragile to move. If Drummond came before Josiah returned, they would be trapped. On the morning of the 3rd day, Clara found Toby in the barn, cleaning his rifle for the 5th time. You think he'll come today? She asked. Toby didn't look up. He said 3 days. Today's 3 days. Josiah should have been back by now. Helena's a long ride. Could be the doctor slowed him down. Could be the weather turned bad. Toby finally met her eyes. Or could be something else. Clara's stomach dropped. What do you mean, something else? Drummond's got friends everywhere. If he wanted to make sure Mr. Callahan didn't make it back in time, don't. Clara's voice came out sharper than she intended. Don't say that. Don't even think it. Toby held up his hands. I'm just saying we gotta be prepared for anything. Clara turned away, pressing her fist against her mouth. She couldn't think about that. Couldn't let herself imagine Josiah lying dead in a ditch somewhere, ambushed by Drummond's men. He'll come back, she said. He promised. Toby didn't respond. They both knew what promises were worth in a territory where men like Drummond made the rules. An hour before noon, Hattie called Clara into the kitchen. I need you to listen to me. Hattie said, her voice low and urgent. If things go bad today, if Drummond comes and we can't stop him, I want you to take the back stairs to the cellar. There's a door down there that leads out to the old root cellar behind the smokehouse. You take your grandmother and you run. Don't look back. Don't stop for nothing. I ain't running. Child. No. Clara grabbed Hattie's hands. I spent my whole life running, from my daddy's fists, from Drummond's threats, from every bad thing that ever happened to me. I ain't running no more, not from this. Hattie stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. All right then, she said. Then we stand together. She reached behind the flour barrel and pulled out a shotgun, old but well-oiled, the stock worn smooth from years of use. This was my husband's, Hattie said. Before the war took him. I've fired it exactly twice in my life. Once to scare off a mountain lion. Once to kill a man who tried to drag me back to Georgia. She held it out to Clara. You know how to shoot. Clara took the weapon. It was heavier than she expected. My daddy taught me, before he started drinking. Then you remember, point and squeeze. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Just point and squeeze. Clara nodded. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. Point and squeeze. They didn't have to wait long. Just after noon, Biscuit started barking. Not his usual excited yip, but a deep warning growl that made the hair on Clara's arm stand up. She ran to the window. Riders, coming up the road. More than before, she counted 8, maybe 9 spread out in a loose formation, with Drummond at the center. "Hattie," she called. "They're here." Hattie appeared beside her, already reaching for her coat. "How many?" "8 or 9. Armed." "Lord have mercy." Hattie grabbed Clara's arm. "Remember what I said. If things go bad, I ain't running." Hattie's jaw tightened. "Then God help us all." They stepped onto the porch together, Hattie with a pistol tucked in her apron, Clara with the shotgun held across her chest. Toby was already there, rifle aimed at the approaching riders. Drummond pulled his horse to a stop at the edge of the yard. He wore a long black coat and a smile that made Clara's skin crawl. "Well, well," he said, looking them over. "Ain't this a picture? The hired help, the orphan boy, and the girl who thinks she's too good for honest work." He tilted his head. "Where's Callahan?" "He'll be here," Clara said. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. "That's so. Because I sent some boys to watch the Helena Road, and they say he hasn't passed by in 3 days. Drummond's smile widened. "Maybe he decided you weren't worth the trouble after all." "You're a liar." "Am I?" He dismounted slowly, deliberately, like a man who had all the time in the world. "Or maybe you just don't know him as well as you think. Men like Callahan, they're good at playing the hero, but when things get hard, they always run. Josiah Callahan ain't never run from nothing in his life." The voice came from behind Drummond's men. Clara's heart stopped. A rider emerged from the tree line, tall, broad-shouldered, sitting his gray mare like he'd been born in the saddle. His face was hard, his eyes harder, and there was a rifle across his lap. Josiah. "Oh, thank God," Clara breathed. Drummond turned slowly. "Well, look who decided to show up after all. Earl." Josiah walked his horse forward until he was level with Drummond's men. They shifted uneasily, hands moving toward their weapons. "I believe you're trespassing on my land. I believe you're interfering with my property. Clara Thornton ain't your property. The debt's paid, square and legal. I got the receipt right here in my pocket." "I told you before." Drummond's voice dropped. "The money was never the point." "Then what is the point?" Drummond stepped forward. "Her daddy made me a promise, sat right across from me at my card table, and signed a paper saying his daughter would work for me until his debts were cleared. Signed it in his own blood." Clara felt sick. "That's a lie. My daddy would never—" "Your daddy was a drunk and a coward who would have sold his own mother for a bottle of whiskey." Drummond pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it up. "It's all right here. Legal and binding. Witnessed by the sheriff himself." "The sheriff works for you," Josiah said. "That paper ain't worth the ink it's written on. Maybe not in a court of law, but out here—" Drummond gestured at the empty land around them. "Out here, I am the law." He snapped his fingers, and his men drew their weapons, 8 guns, all pointed at the porch. "Now," Drummond said, "this can go one of 2 ways. Either the girl comes with me nice and quiet, and nobody gets hurt, or we do this the hard way, and I burn this ranch to the ground with everyone in it." Clara's hands tightened on the shotgun. "I ain't going nowhere with you." "Sweetheart, you don't got a choice." "She's got a choice." Josiah dismounted in one fluid motion and walked toward Drummond until they stood face to face. "And so do you. You can take your men and ride out of here right now, and we'll forget this ever happened. Or you can stay and find out what happens to men who threaten the people under my protection." Drummond laughed. "1 man against 8. Those ain't good odds, Callahan. I've faced worse. In the war, fighting rebels who didn't know which end of a rifle to point. These boys are professionals, Callahan. Hired killers. Every one of them." Then they should know better than to pick a fight they can't win. Something shifted in Drummond's face. The smile faded, replaced by something colder, meaner. "You really willing to die for this girl?" he asked. "A girl you've known for what, a week? 2 weeks?" Josiah didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Drummond stared at Josiah for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. "You're a fool, Callahan. A goddamn fool." "Maybe. But I'm a fool with a clear conscience. Can you say the same?" Drummond's hand moved toward his pistol. Everything happened at once. Josiah drew first, faster than Clara had ever seen anyone move, and fired. The bullet caught Drummond's gun hand, sending the weapon spinning into the dirt. Drummond screamed. His men opened fire. Clara dropped to the porch floor, pulling Hattie down with her. Bullets splintered the railing, punched holes in the walls. She heard Toby returning fire from behind the water barrel. Heard Josiah's rifle crack again and again. "Stay down!" Hattie shouted. Clara pressed her face to the wooden boards, her whole body shaking. Biscuit was barking somewhere inside the house, and she could hear her grandmother crying out in fear. Then, as suddenly as it started, the shooting stopped. Clara raised her head. 3 of Drummond's men were down. 2 more were fleeing on horseback, racing back toward town. The rest had their hands raised, their weapons on the ground. Drummond himself was on his knees in the dirt, clutching his bleeding hand, his face twisted with pain and rage. Josiah stood over him, rifle aimed at his head. "It's over, Earl," Josiah said. "You lost." "This ain't over." Drummond spat blood. "You hear me? This ain't never gonna be over. I got friends in Helena, in Virginia City, all across the territory. You think you can protect her forever? I think you should stop talking." A new voice. Female. Sharp with authority. Clara pushed herself to her feet and stared. A woman had emerged from the tree line, mounted on a bay horse. She wore a man's riding coat and trousers, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Behind her rode 4 men in deputies' badges. "Who the hell are you?" Drummond demanded. "Judge Martha Hawkins." The woman dismounted and walked toward him. "Federal Circuit Court. I've been investigating complaints about your business practices for the past 6 months." Drummond's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" "Because I've got 3 former employees willing to testify about the women you've forced to work in your saloon. I've got records of bribes paid to local officials, and I've got a signed confession from your sheriff who was very eager to cooperate once I explained the alternative." She looked down at him with cold contempt. "Earl Drummond, you're under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you'll use it." The deputies moved forward and hauled Drummond to his feet. He struggled, cursing, but they held him firm. "This is illegal," he shouted. "You can't do this. I have rights." "You have the right to a trial," Judge Hawkins said, "which is more than you gave any of those girls." She nodded to the deputies, and they dragged him toward the horses. Drummond twisted around his eyes, finding Clara on the porch. "This ain't over," he screamed. "You hear me, girl? This ain't—" One of the deputies hit him across the mouth, and he went silent. Clara watched them ride away until they disappeared over the ridge. Then her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the porch steps. Josiah was there in an instant, kneeling beside her, his hands cupping her face. Clara, look at me. Are you hurt?" She shook her head. She couldn't speak. The tears she had been holding back for days, weeks, years finally broke free. "It's over," she sobbed. "It's really over." "It's over." Josiah pulled her against his chest and held her tight. "You're safe now. You're safe." Clara buried her face in his shoulder and wept. She wept for her mother dead before Clara could remember her face. She wept for her father broken by grief and whiskey. She wept for all the nights she had spent cold and hungry and afraid, wondering if tomorrow would be the day everything finally fell apart. And she wept with relief, with gratitude, with something that felt terrifyingly like love. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back and looked at Josiah. His face was streaked with dust and gunpowder, his eyes tired but warm. "How did you know?" she asked. "About the judge?" "I didn't. Not at first." He helped her to her feet. "But when I got to Helena, I started asking questions. Turns out Drummond's made a lot of enemies over the years. One of them was a federal prosecutor who'd been building a case against him. He told me about Judge Hawkins, and I rode all night to find her." "You brought the law down on him." "I brought justice down on him." Josiah's jaw tightened. "The law in these parts belongs to men like Drummond. Justice is something else entirely." Clara reached up and touched his face. He went still, his eyes searching hers. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." She took a shaky breath. "You saved my life. You saved my grandmother's life. You gave us a home when we had nothing. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Clara, I mean it." She stepped closer. "Whatever you want from me, whatever you need, I'll give it. I swear." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. "There's only one thing I want from you," he said. "What?" "Stay." Clara's heart stopped. "What?" "Stay here, on this ranch, with me." His voice roughened. "I know I ain't got no right to ask. I'm twice your age, I got more scars than skin, and I ain't been good company for years. But these past 2 weeks, having you here, having someone to talk to, someone to worry about, someone to fight for, it's made me remember what it feels like to be alive." He lifted her hand to his chest, pressing it over his heart. "I ain't asking for nothing you can't give," he said. "I ain't expecting nothing. But if you could see your way to staying not as hired help, but as something more, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Clara stared at him. This man who had taken her in when she had nothing. Who had paid her father's debts? Who had ridden through the night to bring justice to the man who wanted to destroy her? This man who was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. "Josiah," she breathed. "You don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer ever if you don't want to. I just needed you to know." She kissed him. It wasn't planned. It wasn't pretty. She just reached up, grabbed the front of his shirt, and pulled his mouth down to hers. He made a sound surprise maybe, or something deeper, and then his arms wrapped around her, lifting her off her feet, holding her like she was something precious. The kiss lasted forever. It lasted no time at all. When they finally broke apart, Clara was crying again, but this time she was smiling too. "I'll stay," she said. "I'll stay as long as you'll have me." Josiah pressed his forehead to hers. "That's gonna be a long time." "Good." Behind them, Hattie cleared her throat. "If you two are done making a spectacle of yourselves," she said dryly, "there's a sick woman inside who's been hollering for her granddaughter for the past 10 minutes. Clara laughed, actually laughed for the first time in months. She grabbed Josiah's hand and pulled him toward the house. "Come on," she said. "There's someone I want you to properly meet." They found Agnes sitting up in bed, pale but alert, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Grandma," Clara said, "this is Josiah Callahan, the man I told you about." Agnes studied him for a long moment. Her gaze traveled from his dusty boots to his silver-streaked hair, taking in every detail. "So," she said finally, "you're the one who's been causing all this commotion." Josiah shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, ma'am. I apologize for the disturbance." "Don't apologize. I haven't had this much excitement since the war." Agnes's lips twitched. "Come closer. Let me get a good look at you." Josiah approached the bed hat in his hands. Agnes reached out and took his chin, turning his face this way and that. "Strong jaw," she murmured. "Kind eyes, hands of a working man." She released him and nodded. You'll do. I'll do for my granddaughter. She deserves someone strong, someone good. Agnes's voice softened. Someone who'll fight for her. I think you're that man. Am I wrong? Josiah met her eyes. No, ma'am. You ain't wrong. Good. Agnes settled back against her pillows. Now, someone tell me what happened out there. I heard shooting. Clara sat on the edge of the bed and took her grandmother's hand. It's a long story. I ain't going anywhere. So Clara told her everything. From Drummond's arrival to the gunfight to Judge Hawkins and the arrest. Agnes listened without interrupting, her face shifting from fear to anger to relief as the story unfolded. When Clara finished, Agnes was quiet for a long moment. You're a brave girl, she said finally. Braver than I ever was. I learned from you. No. Agnes shook her head. You learned from yourself. From all the hard things you survived when you had every right to give up. She squeezed Clara's hand. I'm proud of you, child. Your mama would be proud too. Clara's eyes filled with tears. You think so? I know so. They sat together in silence as the afternoon light faded. Hattie brought tea. Toby came in to report that the wounded men had been taken away by the judge's deputies. Biscuit curled up at the foot of Agnes's bed, his tail thumping against the quilt. And Josiah stood by the window, watching over all of them, a quiet sentinel in the gathering dusk. That evening, after Agnes had fallen asleep and the house had gone quiet, Clara found Josiah on the front porch. He was sitting on the top step, looking out at the stars. She settled down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Hell of a day, she said. Hell of a week. Hell of a life. He laughed softly. It was a good sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. Can I ask you something? Clara said. Anything. When Drummond asked if you were willing to die for me, you didn't even hesitate. Why? Josiah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because I already died once, he said. 8 years ago when I came home and found my family in the ground. Part of me stopped living that day. Just kept going through the motions, building this ranch, working the land because I didn't know what else to do. He turned to look at her. But then you showed up. This skinny, stubborn girl with a dying dog and a heart bigger than anyone I ever met. And something inside me woke up. Something I thought was gone forever. Clara's breath caught. So, yeah, he continued. I'd die for you, without hesitation. Because you gave me something worth dying for. Something worth living for. Clara didn't trust herself to speak. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder and let the silence say what words couldn't. They sat there until the stars wheeled overhead and the cold crept into their bones. Then Josiah stood, offered her his hand, and led her inside. At the door to her room, he stopped. Get some rest, he said. Tomorrow, we start building that cabin for your grandmother. Should be done before the first real snow. Clara smiled. And after that. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles just like he had before he left for Helena. After that, we figure out what comes next. Together. Together, Clara repeated. He walked away down the hall, and she watched him go until his door closed behind him. Then she slipped into her room, Biscuit at her heels, and climbed into bed. The sheets were warm, the house was quiet, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Clara Mae Thornton fell asleep without fear. She dreamed of spring. 2 weeks passed, and the cabin began to take shape. Clara watched Josiah work from dawn until his hands bled, hammering nails and cutting timber with a focus that bordered on obsession. Toby helped where he could, and even some of the neighboring ranchers rode over to lend a hand once word spread about what had happened with Drummond. Agnes grew stronger every day. She could walk now short distances with Clara's help, and her cough had faded to a rasp instead of the wet, rattling thing it had been before. The doctor Josiah brought from Helena said she needed rest, warmth, and good food, all things she finally had. "You're spoiling me," Agnes said one morning as Clara brought her breakfast in bed. "I ain't been treated this good since I was a bride." "You deserve it." "Nobody deserves anything, child. We just get what we get and make the best of it." Agnes took a bite of biscuit and chewed thoughtfully. "Speaking of getting things, when's that man of yours going to make an honest woman of you?" Clara nearly dropped the tray. "Grandma, what, I ain't blind. I see the way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and scattered the stars yourself." We haven't. It's complicated." "Ain't nothing complicated about it." Agnes set down her fork. "He loves you. You love him. The rest is just details." Clara sank onto the edge of the bed. "It ain't that simple." "Why not?" "Because I'm 19 years old and he's 43. Because I showed up at his door like a beggar with nothing to offer. Because he had a wife he loved and a son he lost, and I don't know if there's room in his heart for—" "Stop." Clara fell silent. Agnes reached out and took her hand. "Let me tell you something about hearts. They don't run out of room. They ain't like houses or barns that can only hold so much. Every person you love just makes them bigger. And from what I've seen, that man's heart has been empty for a long time. You ain't taking space from his wife and boy. You're giving him a reason to keep living." Clara's eyes burned. "How do you know?" "Because I see it in his eyes every time he looks at you. The same way your grandfather looked at me, God rest his soul." Agnes squeezed her hand. "Don't let fear steal what you've found, Clara. That kind of love don't come around twice." Clara didn't know what to say, so she just nodded and kissed her grandmother's forehead and went to find Josiah. She found him behind the barn splitting wood. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. Despite the cold, his sleeves rolled up past his elbows. The scar on his forearm, the one she'd noticed but never asked about, caught the light with each swing of the axe. "Josiah." He paused mid-swing and turned. "Clara, everything all right? Can we talk?" Something flickered in his eyes. He set down the axe and wiped his hands on his trousers. "What's on your mind?" Clara took a breath. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honest, no matter how much it might hurt." His jaw tightened. "All right. Do you—" She stopped, started again. "When you look at me, do you see me? Or do you see someone to save? Someone to fill the hole your wife and son left behind?" The words hung in the air between them. Josiah didn't respond right away. He stood there, his chest rising and falling, his eyes searching her face like he was looking for something he was afraid he wouldn't find. "Come with me," he said finally. He started walking. Clara followed. They walked past the main house, past the chicken coop, past the half-built cabin where Agnes would soon live. They walked until they reached a small clearing behind the old barn where two wooden crosses stood side by side beneath a twisted oak tree. Josiah stopped in front of the graves. "This is Sarah," he said quietly, "and this is Thomas." Clara's throat closed. She had known about them, everyone knew, but seeing the graves, seeing the names carved into the weathered wood, made it real in a way words never could. "I buried them myself," Josiah continued. "Dug the holes with my bare hands. Didn't eat for 3 days. Didn't sleep for a week. Part of me wanted to climb into that hole with them and never come out." "Josiah, let me finish." He turned to face her. "I spent 8 years living with their ghosts, talking to Sarah at night like she could hear me, keeping Thomas's room exactly the way he left it. I thought if I held on tight enough, if I remembered hard enough, maybe I could bring them back." His voice cracked. "But they ain't coming back. I know that now. And holding on to them, it wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of letting go. Fear of finding something new and losing it all over again." He took a step toward her. "Then you showed up. This fierce, stubborn girl who walked through the snow to save a dog because she couldn't stand to watch him die. And something inside me, something I thought was dead, started beating again." He reached out and cupped her face in his rough hands. "When I look at you, Clara, I don't see someone to save. I see someone who saved me. I see a woman strong enough to survive things that would have broken anyone else. I see someone I want to spend the rest of my life with if she'll have me." Clara was crying now. She couldn't stop. "You really mean that?" she whispered. "I ain't said a word I don't mean since the day I met you." She threw her arms around his neck and held on like she was drowning, and he was the only solid ground in the world. They stood there for a long time, wrapped around each other, with the ghosts of his past watching silently from their wooden crosses. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like a blessing instead of a curse. That evening, Hattie cornered Clara in the kitchen. "Sit down," the older woman said. "We need to talk." Clara sat. "Is something wrong?" "That depends." Hattie lowered herself into the chair across from her. "I've been watching you and Josiah these past weeks, watching the way you look at each other, the way you move around each other like two planets caught in the same orbit. Is that a problem?" "It could be, if you ain't careful." Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" Hattie was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer than Clara had ever heard it. "I was married once, long time ago back in Georgia. His name was Samuel. He was a blacksmith on the neighboring plantation. Biggest, gentlest man you ever saw. We used to meet in secret down by the river because they wouldn't let us marry proper." Clara listened, her heart aching. "When the war came, Samuel ran north to join the Union Army. Said he was going to fight for our freedom, then come back for me." Hattie's eyes grew distant. "He died at Antietam. I didn't find out until 3 years later when I finally made it north myself." "Hattie, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be wise." Hattie leaned forward. "I spent a long time after Samuel died thinking I didn't deserve happiness. Thinking that loving someone new would be a betrayal of what we had. It took me years to understand that moving forward ain't the same as forgetting." She reached out and took Clara's hand. "Josiah's been stuck in the same place I was, frozen in grief, unable to move. But you've thawed something in him, and now you're scared that you ain't worthy, scared that you're taking something that don't belong to you." Clara's breath caught. "How did you—" "Because I know that look. I wore it myself for 15 years. Hattie squeezed her hand. "Listen to me, child. Loving someone who's lost before ain't stealing from the dead. It's honoring them. Because every person who loved and lost knows how precious it is. They don't waste a second chance." Clara wiped her eyes. "Thank you for telling me." "Don't thank me. Just don't make the same mistakes I did. When that man asks you to marry him, and he will, you say yes. You say yes, and you don't look back." Clara laughed despite her tears. "How do you know he's going to ask? Girl, I've known Josiah Callahan for 5 years. I've never seen him do anything halfway in his life." Hattie stood and patted Clara's shoulder. "Now help me with dinner. We got a hungry household to feed." 3 days later, the cabin was finished. Clara led Agnes through the door, supporting her grandmother's frail weight against her side. The old woman stopped just inside the threshold and looked around with wide eyes. It was small, just one room with a sleeping alcove and a small cooking area, but it was warm and clean and solid. A fire already crackled in the stone hearth. A rocking chair sat by the window. The bed was piled high with quilts. "Oh, my lord," Agnes breathed. "Clara, this is beautiful." "Josiah built it. For you." Agnes turned to look at the man standing in the doorway, hat in his hands, looking suddenly uncertain. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me, ma'am. It was my pleasure. Come here." Josiah approached hesitantly. Agnes reached up. She had to stretch. He was so tall and pulled his face down to hers. "You're a good man, Josiah Callahan," she said quietly. "Better than you know. Better than you believe. And you've given my granddaughter something I never could, a future. A real future. I'll never forget that." She kissed his cheek. Josiah's face went red. Clara bit back a smile. "I'm going to rest now," Agnes said, moving toward the bed. You two run along. I'm sure you've got better things to do than watch an old woman sleep." Clara helped her grandmother settle into the bed, tucked the quilts around her, and kissed her forehead. "Sleep well, Grandma." "I intend to. First real bed I've had in years." Agnes closed her eyes, still smiling. "Now go on. Get out of here." Clara and Josiah stepped outside. The cold air hit their faces sharp and clean. "She likes you," Clara said. "She's a good woman." "She is." Clara hesitated. "Josiah, there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" "I'm scared." The words came out in a rush. "I'm scared of how much I feel for you. I'm scared that I ain't good enough, that I don't deserve this, that someday you'll wake up and realize you made a mistake." Josiah didn't respond, just pulled her close and held her against his chest. "I ain't never been this happy," Clara continued, her voice muffled against his coat. "And it terrifies me. Because every good thing I've ever had has been taken away. My mama, my home, everything. And I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "Clara." He pulled back and lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I can't promise you nothing bad will ever happen. Life don't work that way. But I can promise you this, whatever comes, we'll face it together. You ain't alone anymore, and you ain't never gonna be alone again." She searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that he didn't mean every word. She found none. "Okay," she whispered. "Together. Together." He kissed her, then soft and slow, and Clara felt something inside her finally settle into place. The next morning, trouble found them again. Clara was in the chicken coop collecting eggs when she heard horses approaching. Her heart jumped into her throat, memories of Drummond's men still fresh in her mind. But when she peered around the corner, she saw something different. A wagon, driven by a woman she didn't recognize. Clara set down her basket and walked toward the main house where Josiah was already stepping onto the porch. "Can I help you?" he called. The woman climbed down from the wagon. She was maybe 40, plain-faced and tired-looking, with a boy of about 10 clinging to her skirts. "You Josiah Callahan?" she asked. "I am. My name's Margaret Porter. This is my son James." She pushed the boy forward slightly. "I heard what you did. Taking in that girl and her grandmother. Standing up to Earl Drummond." Josiah's expression didn't change. "Word travels fast." "It does when you give people hope." Margaret's voice cracked. I was one of Drummond's girls, 10 years ago. He caught me when I was 16, same as he tried to catch Miss Thornton." Clara's stomach turned. "I got out eventually, married a farmer who didn't care about my past, but he died last winter and the bank's threatening to take our land." Margaret wiped her eyes. "I ain't asking for charity. I can work, cook, clean, mend, whatever you need. I just need a safe place for me and my boy." Silence. Clara looked at Josiah. His jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable. Then he stepped down from the porch and walked toward Margaret. "Ma'am," he said, "I ain't got much use for another cook. Hattie runs my kitchen better than I ever could. But I do need help with the spring planting come March. If you're willing to do field work, I can offer you room and board plus wages." Margaret's face crumpled with relief. "Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Callahan. You don't know what this means." "I think I do." Josiah looked at the boy. "James, you know how to ride." The boy shook his head shyly. "Well, that won't do. Man needs to know how to ride in Montana. Toby'll teach you. Come on inside, we'll get you both settled." He led them toward the house, and Clara fell into step beside him. "You're a good man," she said softly. "I'm a man who got a second chance. Figure the least I can do is pass it along." Over the next few days, the ranch began to feel less like a home and more like a small community. Margaret turned out to be a tireless worker, up before dawn and still going after dark. Young James attached himself to Toby like a shadow, following the older boy around the property and peppering him with endless questions about horses and cattle and guns. Agnes adopted them both immediately, insisting that James visit her each afternoon for reading lessons, and that Margaret join her for tea whenever her work allowed. And Clara found herself settling into a rhythm she had never known before work, that had purpose, people who cared, a future that extended beyond simple survival. But happiness, she was learning, came with its own fears. One night, she woke to the sound of footsteps. She lay still, listening, her heart pounding. The footsteps moved down the hall, quiet but deliberate, and then she heard the front door open and close. Clara slipped out of bed and followed. She found Josiah sitting on the porch steps, his head in his hands. His shoulders shook slightly, and when she got closer, she realized he was crying. "Josiah." He looked up sharply, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Clara, what are you doing up? I heard you leave." She sat down beside him. "What's wrong?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. Today's Thomas's birthday. Would have been 12 years old. Clara's heart shattered. "Oh, Josiah." "Every year on this day, I go out to his grave and talk to him. Tell him about the ranch, about the horses, about all the things he missed." Josiah's voice broke. "I tell him I'm sorry. Sorry I wasn't there. Sorry I couldn't save him. Sorry I keep living when he don't get to." Clara took his hand. She didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. "He would have liked you," Josiah continued after a while. "He was like that, always bringing home strays. Birds with broken wings, kittens nobody wanted. Sarah used to say his heart was too big for his body." "He sounds wonderful." "He was." Josiah turned to look at her. "For a long time I thought loving you meant betraying them. Like I was replacing them. Like moving forward meant leaving them behind. And now I think they'd want me to be happy. Sarah always said I was too serious, too caught up in duty and responsibility. She'd probably be relieved I finally found someone who makes me smile." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "What was she like, Sarah?" "Kind, patient, stronger than she looked." Josiah's voice softened. "She used to sing while she worked. Hymns mostly. I'd come in from the fields and hear her voice floating through the windows, and I'd know I was home. I can't sing. Not even a little." He laughed a real laugh, wet and broken but genuine. "That's all right. You got other talents." "Like what?" "Like making me believe in things I thought I'd given up on." He turned and cupped her face in his hands. "Like giving an old fool a reason to keep going." Clara kissed him, tasting salt from his tears and hers. "I love you," she said. The words came easily, naturally, like they'd been waiting inside her all along. "I love you, Josiah Callahan. And I ain't going nowhere." His breath caught. "Say it again." "I love you." "Again." "I love you." She was laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you. I love you. I love—" He kissed her, swallowing the words, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble into dust. They sat on the porch until dawn wrapped around each other, watching the stars fade and the sky turn pink. And when Josiah finally stood and pulled her to her feet, he looked at her with something new in his eyes. Something that looked a lot like hope. "Clara Mae Thornton," he said, "will you marry me?" She stared at him. "What? I know it's too soon. I know I should court you proper, take you to dances, buy you flowers and all that foolishness. But I'm 43 years old and I ain't got time for foolishness." He took both her hands in his. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build a life with you. I want to give you my name and my home and whatever's left of this worn-out heart." Clara couldn't breathe. "Josiah, you don't have to answer now. You can take all the time you need. I just—" "Yes." He stopped. "What?" "Yes." She was laughing, crying, shaking. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Yes." Josiah stared at her like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he lifted her off her feet and spun her around until she was dizzy. She said yes, he shouted to the empty yard. She said yes. Put me down, Clara laughed. You'll wake everyone up. Let them wake up. This is the best day of my life. The front door banged open and Hattie appeared on the porch in her nightgown, a shotgun in her hands. What in the name of... She stopped when she saw them. Lord have mercy. Y'all scared me half to death. Sorry, Hattie. Josiah set Clara down but didn't let go of her hand. I just asked Clara to marry me. She said yes. Hattie's face went through about 6 different expressions before settling on something that looked suspiciously like joy. Well, it's about damn time, she said. Now get inside, both of you. If we're planning a wedding, I need coffee. Clara laughed and leaned into Josiah's side, feeling his arm wrap around her shoulders. A wedding. Her wedding. 6 months ago, she had been sleeping in a shed, starving, hopeless, certain she would die before spring. Now she was planning a future with a man who loved her. Life, she was learning, had a funny way of surprising you. And sometimes, just sometimes, those surprises were good. The news spread across the territory like wildfire. Josiah Callahan, the widower who hadn't smiled in 8 years, was getting married. To a girl half his age. A girl who had shown up at his door with nothing but a dying dog and a broken heart. Some folks thought it was scandalous. Others thought it was romantic. Most just thought it was about damn time that man found some happiness. Clara didn't care what people thought. She had stopped caring about that a long time ago. What she cared about was the way Josiah looked at her every morning across the breakfast table. The way his hand found hers whenever they walked together. The way he said her name Clara like it was a prayer and a promise rolled into one. 2 weeks after the proposal, they set a date. The first Sunday of December. A winter wedding, Hattie said, was good luck, something about starting fresh when the world was at rest. Clara thought that sounded about right. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of activity. Hattie took charge of the preparations with military precision, delegating tasks to everyone in the household. Margaret helped with the cooking. Toby was put in charge of cleaning the barn where the ceremony would be held. Even young James had a job making sure Biscuit stayed out of trouble. Agnes, meanwhile, appointed herself Clara's personal advisor on all matters matrimonial. You need to tell him, Agnes said one afternoon, watching Clara try on the dress Hattie had altered from an old gown she'd found in the attic. Clara froze. Tell him what? About the nightmares. About the fear you still carry. About all the things you haven't said. Clara's hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric over her hips. He knows enough. Does he? Does he know you still wake up in the middle of the night afraid your daddy's gonna come through the door? Does he know you flinch every time someone raises their voice? Does he know? Stop. Clara's voice came out sharper than she intended. Please, just stop. Agnes was quiet for a moment. Then she patted the edge of the bed beside her. Come here, child. Clara sat. I ain't trying to upset you, Agnes said gently. I just don't want you walking into this marriage with secrets between you. Secrets have a way of festering. They turn into walls, and before you know it, you're living with a stranger instead of a husband. I don't know how to tell him. Clara's eyes burned. I don't know how to say that sometimes I'm afraid of him. Not because he's done anything wrong, but because every man I've ever trusted has hurt me. Then tell him exactly that. Those words. Just like you told me. What if he changes his mind? What if he realizes I'm too broken? Clara Mae Thornton. Agnes's voice was firm. That man didn't fall in love with some perfect fantasy. He fell in love with you. All of you. The broken parts and the whole parts. The fear and the courage. If he can't handle the truth of who you are, then he ain't the man for you. Clara wiped her eyes. And if he can, then you've found something rare, something worth holding on to with both hands. Agnes smiled. Now stand up straight. Let me see that dress proper. That night, Clara found Josiah in his study. He looked up when she knocked on the doorframe. Clara, everything all right? Can we talk? Something shifted in his expression. He set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "Of course. Come in." She closed the door behind her and sat in the chair across from his desk. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together to hide it. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Josiah waited. Clara took a breath. "I'm scared of you." The words landed like stones in still water. "What?" Josiah's voice was barely a whisper. "Not because you've done anything wrong. You haven't. You've been nothing but kind and good and patient." Clara forced herself to meet his eyes. "But my daddy was kind once too, before he started drinking, before he started hitting, and part of me, a part I can't control, keeps waiting for you to turn into him." Josiah didn't move, didn't speak. His face had gone pale. "I know it ain't fair," Clara continued, her voice breaking. "I know you ain't him, but I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, and I'm back in that shack, and I can hear him coming, and I'm so afraid." She couldn't finish. The tears came too fast. Josiah stood, came around the desk, knelt in front of her, and took her hands in his. "Look at me," he said. She looked. "I am never going to hurt you." His voice was rough with emotion. "Never. Not with my hands, not with my words, not with anything. Do you understand me? I want to believe that." "Then believe it. Because it's the truth." He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "I've done things I ain't proud of. I've killed men in battle. I've made choices that keep me up at night. But I have never raised my hand to a woman. And I never will." Clara searched his face, looking for doubt, looking for anger, looking for any sign that she had made a mistake. She found only love. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." "Don't apologize. Not for this." Josiah cupped her face in his hands. "Thank you for trusting me enough to say it. That's all I could ever ask." She kissed him, then fierce and desperate, and full of all the words she couldn't say. When they finally broke apart, Josiah pressed his forehead to hers. "We're gonna get through this," he said. "Together. However long it takes, however hard it gets. I ain't going anywhere." Clara believed him. For the first time in her life, she believed. The day before the wedding disaster struck. Clara was in the kitchen helping Hattie prepare food for the reception when Toby burst through the door. "Miss Clara, come quick, it's your grandmother." Clara's heart stopped. She dropped the bowl she was holding and ran. She found Agnes in the cabin, collapsed on the floor beside the bed. Her face was gray, her breathing shallow and wet, the same terrible sound Clara had heard in that shed months ago. "No!" Clara fell to her knees beside her. "No, no, no. Grandma, can you hear me? Grandma?" Agnes's eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy, unfocused. "Clara." Her voice was barely a breath. "Is that you, child?" "I'm here. I'm right here." Clara grabbed her hand. It was ice cold. "What happened?" "I stood up too fast, got dizzy, couldn't catch myself." Agnes coughed a wet, horrible sound. "I'm all right. Just need to rest." "You ain't all right. I'm sending for the doctor." "No." Agnes gripped her hand with surprising strength. "No doctors. Not today. Not when you've got a wedding tomorrow." "The wedding can wait. The wedding cannot wait." Agnes's eyes found hers, suddenly clear and fierce. "Listen to me, Clara Mae. I ain't got much time left. I've known that for months, maybe years. But I held on because I needed to see you safe. I needed to know you had someone to take care of you when I'm gone." Clara's chest tightened. "Don't talk like that." "It's the truth, and we both know it. I'm tired, child. Tired in my bones. Tired in my soul." Agnes reached up and touched Clara's cheek. "But I can rest easy now, because I've seen you find love. Real love. The kind your mama and daddy had before it all went wrong. The The kind I had with your grandfather." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "I can't do this without you." "Yes, you can. You're stronger than you know. Stronger than I ever was." Agnes smiled. "Now help me back into bed, and then go finish getting ready for your wedding." "Grandma?" "Do as I say, child. Let me see you married. Let me see you happy. That's all I ask." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to scream, wanted to beg God or fate or whoever was listening to give her grandmother more time. But she knew that look in Agnes's eyes, the look of someone who had made peace with what was coming. So she helped her grandmother back into bed, tucked the quilts around her, kissed her forehead. "I love you," Clara whispered. "I love you so much." "I know, child, I know." Agnes closed her eyes. "Now go. Be happy. That's an order." Clara went. She found Josiah waiting outside the cabin, his face tight with worry. "How is she?" he asked. Clara shook her head. She couldn't speak. Josiah pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and clear. Clara stood in front of the mirror in her room, wearing the white dress Hattie had altered her hair pinned up with dried flowers she'd collected from the hillside. She looked like someone else, someone clean and whole and worthy of being loved. A knock at the door. "Come in." Hattie entered, followed by Margaret. Both women stopped when they saw her. "Lord have mercy," Hattie breathed. "You look beautiful." "You really do," Margaret added, her eyes glistening. "Like an angel." Clara tried to smile. "I don't feel like an angel. I feel like I'm going to be sick." "That's normal." Hattie came forward and took her hands. "Every bride feels that way. But I want you to listen to me. That man out there, he loves you more than he's loved anything in 8 long years. And you love him just as much. That's all that matters. Not the dress, not the flowers, not what anybody thinks. Just the two of you, standing before God and making a promise." Clara nodded. "Okay, I can do this." "Yes, you can. Now come on. There's someone who wants to see you." They led her down the hall to the back door where a small wagon waited. And sitting in the wagon, wrapped in quilts despite the cold, was Agnes. Clara's heart stopped. "Grandma, what are you doing out here? You think I'm going to miss my granddaughter's wedding?" Agnes's voice was weak, but her eyes were bright. "Help me down. I want to walk her in." "Wait. You can't walk." "Then I'll lean on Josiah's boy. What's his name, Toby?" Agnes waved her hand. "Come on now, we're wasting daylight." Toby stepped forward, his face serious. "I got you, ma'am. Don't worry." Together, they helped Agnes out of the wagon. She was so light, just bones and will, wrapped in a faded shawl, but she held herself straight, her chin high. "Let's go," she said. "I ain't got all day." The barn had been transformed. Clara saw it through the open doors as they approached, candles flickering on every surface, benches filled with the handful of neighbors who had come to witness the ceremony. And at the far end, standing beneath an arch of evergreen branches, was Josiah. He turned when he heard them coming, and when he saw her in her white dress, with her grandmother on her arm, his face did something Clara had never seen before. He cried, not sobbing, not breaking down, just silent tears sliding down his weathered cheeks as he watched her walk toward him. Clara felt her own tears start. She didn't try to stop them. Agnes walked her all the way to the altar. Every step was an effort. Clara could feel her grandmother's weight growing heavier, could hear her labored breathing, but she made it. When they reached Josiah, Agnes stopped. "Mr. Callahan," she said, her voice carrying through the silent barn. "I'm entrusting you with my granddaughter. She's the best thing I ever did in this world. You treat her right." Josiah stepped forward and took Agnes's free hand. "I will, ma'am. I swear it on my life." Agnes studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Good." She turned to Clara, reached up and cupped her face. Be happy, child. That's all I ever wanted for you." "I will, Grandma. I promise." Agnes smiled. Then she let go and allowed Toby to lead her to a seat in the front row. Clara turned to face Josiah. He was still crying. So was she. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi," he whispered back. The preacher cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved." The ceremony was simple. A few words, a few promises. A ring that Josiah had carved himself from a piece of oak, the same oak that shaded his wife and son's graves. "With this ring," he said, sliding it onto Clara's finger, "I thee wed. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Clara's hand trembled as she took the ring Hattie had given her, a simple band that had belonged to Hattie's husband Samuel. "With this ring," she said, "I thee wed. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." The preacher smiled. "By the power vested in me by the Montana Territory and Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Callahan, you may kiss your bride." Josiah cupped her face in his hands and kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise. The barn erupted in cheers. When they broke apart, Clara was laughing and crying at the same time. She turned to look at her grandmother, wanting to share this moment, wanting to see the joy on Agnes's face. Agnes was smiling. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were folded peacefully in her lap. She wasn't moving. Clara's laughter died in her throat. "Grandma!" She pulled away from Josiah and ran to Agnes's side, dropping to her knees. "Grandma, Grandma, wake up!" Nothing. "No." Clara grabbed her grandmother's hand. It was still warm, still soft. "No, please, not now, not yet." Hattie appeared beside her, pressed 2 fingers to Agnes's neck, waited. Then she looked at Clara with tears in her eyes and slowly shook her head. "She's gone, child. She's at peace." The sound that came out of Clara wasn't human. It was something deeper, something primal, a grief so raw it tore her apart from the inside. Josiah was there in an instant, pulling her into his arms, holding her as she screamed. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I'm so sorry." She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. All she could do was cling to him and weep for the woman who had loved her, raised her, sacrificed everything for her. The woman who had held on just long enough to see her married. The woman who was finally at rest. They buried Agnes 3 days later, beside the graves of Sarah and Thomas Callahan. Clara had wanted to protest at first. Agnes wasn't family, not by blood, but Josiah insisted. "She's family now," he said. "Same as you, same as all of us." So they dug a grave beneath the twisted oak tree, and they laid Agnes Marie Thornton to rest in the frozen Montana earth. Clara stood at the graveside, Josiah's arm around her shoulders, and said goodbye to the last piece of her old life. "Thank you," she whispered to the wooden cross. "Thank you for everything. For loving me when no one else did. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. For holding on long enough to see me safe." She pressed a hand to the cold ground. "Rest now, Grandma. You've earned it." The weeks that followed were hard. Clara moved through her days like a ghost going through the motions of her new life, without really feeling any of it. She cooked, she cleaned, she lay beside Josiah at night, but part of her was somewhere else. Somewhere buried beneath that twisted oak tree. Josiah didn't push. He just stayed close. Let her grieve. Held her when she cried. Made sure she ate even when she didn't want to. One night, about a month after the funeral, Clara woke to find his side of the bed empty. She found him on the porch, sitting on the top step, looking up at the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, settling beside him. "Bad dreams. About Sarah and Thomas. About losing you." He turned to look at her. "I know you're hurting, Clara. I know your grandmother's death broke something inside you. But I need you to know I'm here. Whatever you need, However long it takes. I ain't going anywhere. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. I know. Do you? Because sometimes I see you looking at me, and it's like you're waiting for me to disappear. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then, my whole life everyone I loved left. My mama died. My daddy turned into a monster. My grandmother held on as long as she could, but even she couldn't stay forever. She lifted her head and met his eyes. Part of me is still waiting for you to leave too. For this all to turn out to be some beautiful dream I'm gonna wake up from. Josiah took her hands. Then let me tell you something. When Sarah died, I thought my life was over. I thought there was nothing left for me but work and grief and an empty house full of ghosts. I lived like that for 8 years. 8 years of nothing but going through the motions. His voice roughened. Then you showed up. This fierce, stubborn girl who walked through the snow to save a dog, who stood up to men twice her size, who loved her grandmother so much she'd starve herself to keep her fed. He cupped her face in his hands. You brought me back to life, Clara. You made me remember what it feels like to hope, to want, to love. And I ain't ever going back to that empty existence. Not as long as you're here. Not as long as there's breath in my body. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. I love you, Josiah. I love you too, more than I ever thought I could love anyone again. He pressed his forehead to hers. We're gonna get through this, together, just like we promised. Clara kissed him. It tasted like salt and hope and forever. Together, she whispered against his lips. Spring came early that year. The snow melted, the grass turned green. The horses foaled, the cattle calved, and the ranch came alive with the sounds of new beginnings. Clara woke one morning to find Biscuit pawing at her face. What is it, boy? She pushed herself up groggy. What's wrong? The dog barked once and ran to the door, tail wagging. Clara followed him outside where Josiah was waiting with a smile on his face. Come with me, he said. I want to show you something. He led her past the barn, past the chicken coop, past Agnes's cabin, where Margaret and James now lived, to the clearing beneath the twisted oak tree. And there, next to the 3 graves, stood something new. A bench, hand-carved from oak, polished until it gleamed. And on the back, burned into the wood in careful letters, for those we've loved and lost, and for those who carry on. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. I wanted you to have a place, Josiah said quietly. A place to sit, to remember, to talk to her whenever you need to. Clara couldn't speak. The tears came too fast. She threw her arms around his neck and held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to sweep her away. Thank you, she finally managed. Thank you, Josiah. You're welcome. He pulled back and wiped the tears from her cheeks. There's one more thing. What? He took her hand and pressed it to his chest. Beneath her palm, she felt his heartbeat steady and strong. You feel that? Yes. That beats for you, Clara. Only for you. And it's going to keep beating for as long as the good Lord allows. He covered her hand with his. I ain't a young man. I ain't got decades left. But whatever time I have, I'm spending it with you. Making you happy. Building a life together. That's a promise I intend to keep. Clara looked at him. This man, who had saved her, loved her, given her everything she never knew she needed, and felt her heart swell until she thought it might burst. I don't deserve you, she said. Yes, you do. You deserve all of this and more. He kissed her forehead. Now come on. Hattie's making breakfast, and if we're late, she'll have both our hides. He started walking back toward the house. Clara lingered a moment longer, looking at the 4 graves beneath the oak tree. Sarah, Thomas, Agnes, and someday, a long time from now, 2 more. A family, bound not by blood, but by love and loss and the stubborn refusal to give up. Clara touched the bench one more time. Then she turned and followed her husband home. Biscuit bounded ahead of them, tail-wagging tongue, lolling in pure doggy joy. The sun was warm on Clara's face. The birds were singing. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place that had been frozen for so long, she had forgotten it existed, something bloomed. Hope. Not the fragile, frightened hope of a girl who had lost everything, but the fierce, unshakable hope of a woman who had survived, who had found love in the most unexpected place, who had built a family from the broken pieces of her past. She was Clara Mae Callahan now. Wife, daughter, friend, survivor. And this was her home. 6 months later, Clara stood on the porch watching Josiah chase young James across the yard, while Toby looked on and laughed. Margaret was hanging laundry by the cabin. Hattie was singing in the kitchen, her voice drifting through the open window. Biscuit lay at Clara's feet, his golden fur gleaming in the sunlight, his tail thumping lazily against the wooden boards. She pressed a hand to her belly. To the life growing there, the secret she hadn't told anyone yet. A child. Their child. A new beginning written in blood and bone, and the fierce, stubborn love of two people who had found each other against all odds. Clara smiled. She thought about the girl she had been, the desperate, starving girl who had walked through the snow with nothing but a dying dog and a prayer. She thought about her grandmother's words. Sometimes child blessings come dressed in old pain or a pair of worn-out boots. She thought about all the doors that had slammed in her face, all the people who had turned away, all the nights she had spent cold and hungry and alone. And she thought about how far she had come, how much she had survived, how much she had gained. Josiah looked up and caught her eye. He smiled, that rare, precious smile that still made her heart skip, and waved. Clara waved back. Some loves begin with joy, others with fire, but the rarest kind starts with loss. Because sometimes it is in what we give away, a dying puppy, a broken heart, the last shreds of hope, that we find everything we never knew we needed. Clara Mae Callahan had given away everything she had, and in return, she had received the world. The end. And if this story touched your heart, if you felt every tear and every moment of healing, don't forget to hit that like button and share with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Drop a comment below. Tell us, would you have left the puppy, or would you have stayed too? And if you're drawn to timeless love stories born from dust, danger, and devotion, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale. This has been a story about lost love and the families we choose. Thank you for watching until the very end.